Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Whenever you happenstance into this incredible dialogue with this esteemed panel discussion with folks that have been giving me their time in a way that I have been so fortunate to try to bring their voices, their expertise forward to a nation that is desperate for this information. And we're recording this on Friday, April 4th, approximately 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's April 4th, like I said, which is important because tomorrow there's going to be a nationwide effort to have protests around the country, which are going to be reactions for a lot of people with a lot of important things to bring to the fore. But I believe without the focus of an understanding of what's happening, particularly with the background and the expertise of the folks that are lending their time to get this sort of perspective, that we're going to have a hard time moving forward to be able to really pinpoint how to move the table or turn the table on this administration that we're also concerned about. So, guys, just to set the table, the first thing, and by the way, as always, I'll put the descriptions and the links below, but I think people are beginning more and more customized to these happening on Friday afternoon. So hopefully you'll become more and more familiar with the folks that are lending their time to this. But the first thing that took place this week, I think that we might be able to respond to, are two things that are absolutely enormous. First and foremost, obviously, in light of Trump's tariff designations and the implosion of the markets yesterday, that might be a dialogue.
And today,
Oh yeah, well, of course, trillions and trillions of dollars have just simply evaporated. And of course, we saw, in Congress on the floor of the House, Senator Cory Booker's amazing 25-hour filibuster, which I was shocked to learn that Strom Thurmond had gone 24 hours before that to try to defeat the Civil Rights Act of 1954, I believe, or 1957. But I thought that was amazing. But a lot of what we heard in that speech, or at least the highlights, because I didn't stay for the 25 hours, addressed a lot of what we've been talking about on these panels. And so I guess we should probably start with what is the most important to Americans, and that's their wallet. So, Bill, I think I'm just going to open up the dialogue with the question to you. How are you responding given what we've just seen played out in the last 48 hours?
So in soccer, we call this an own goal when you score against yourself. And this is the most spectacular own goal in economic history. So great stuff.
By the way, June, you have forewarned us about a lot of these elements that have taken place to create Doge, but were you surprised by Trump told us that he was going to have a policy of this tariff initiative, right? But tariffs have been with us from the very beginning of time. Can you give us a little bit more details about how this self goal has manifested and what the consequence is?
Well, two parts. Was I surprised? Trump loves tariffs. I think the key is not that. He's always loved tariffs. He did it during the first Trump administration. It's the absence of people surrounding him who are the adults in the room. The adults are gone. The sycophants rule. The second question are the consequences. And my focus is on the longer term consequences. There's a very good argument that what explains the rise of Trump is the great financial crisis and the fact that Wall Street quickly recovered. Wall Street was bailed out, mainstream wasn't. That Mitch McConnell, as much as the Titans of Wall Street, is responsible for the fact that by 2016, teachers hadn't recovered. They were at the lowest point they had been in decades, maybe the lowest point ever, in the degree to which teachers are paid a level comparable with people with similar education in other professions. They didn't recover. Housing markets in Black communities had not recovered. Latino communities, which were the hardest hit, had begun to recover, but much more slowly than white communities. And the states, what McConnell did, that remains not a subject at all of discussion, is you simultaneously had the federal government in this, you know, overseeing a national Great Recession and kneecapping the ability of the states to recover. The states have to run balanced budgets. The federal government does it. When McConnell ended stimulus in 2010, producing a fiscal cliff, little people are the ones who were hurt in ways we do not appreciate to this day. And I would say with construction workers, the construction workers laid off in 2008 never recovered. The construction industry recovered and hired new, different workers. That's what's about to happen. Forget about Wall Street. Forget about the grand questions about manufacturing in this economy. Trump is simultaneously crashing the economy and undercutting the source of tax revenue for the states and dismantling the social safety net designed to protect and provide some ability for people to survive an economic downturn. He's doing all three things simultaneously. This will be worse in its impact on the average citizen than the great financial crisis if it persists more than a couple of weeks.
June, can I ask you a question? What's your theory on why he's doing this? I know I have my theory. I don't think it's an accident.
Okay. I don't know. I'm going to defer to you because
All
I mean,
right.
I have read the blogs, but and listened to the podcasts, but I have no inside information.
Well, I don't think that I don't think that they thought about this or didn't think about this. I don't know if you saw who rang the bell last night on Wall Street, but it was all his sycophants, Rudy Giuliani, all that. They were celebrating the fact that he killed the market. And again, it's happening today. And trillions and trillions of dollars of our economy have just gone poof. Maybe they'll come back, maybe they won't. But I truly believe, and of course they're not retaliatory tariffs at all. I think they've done it with a purpose. And I think that the purpose is they want to fill the federal coffers so that they can give with some justification this tax break to billionaires. I think that's part of this whole endeavor because it makes no sense otherwise. And I don't think it's accidental. I don't think he's doing it just because he's a dummy or he's transactional. I think, of course, he's doing it because he wants leverage, but I think that the ulterior purpose is to fill the federal coffers with these revenues that he thinks he's going to generate from our own businesses and countrymen paying these taxes, paying these tariffs. And that's my personal view. I just can't think of any other reason why he'd want to disable the economy so bad.
Well, I was prepared to leave this to the economist today, but Paul, I'm more cynical than you. I mean, this is part of the Great American Shakedown, and he wants to shake down the companies who are going to be seeking exceptions. He's already accepted industries and products that are close in his circle, and he is raising the currency of his approval and the need to bend a knee to him from that perspective. I think he thinks that international relations also work as a protection racket. And so this is a big shakedown of all of our allies because he doesn't. I think he genuinely believes that they don't pay their fair share of the of the defense bill and that we are being treated unfairly in the marketplace, and he's trying to gain that leverage. And if they want the cooperation of the federal government, they're going to have to make a deal with him. But I think the more troubling part, of course, is that it's the domestic companies that are going to be seeking those exceptions, and already have, and it's going to enrich he and his family. It's going to enrich his circle of oligarchs around him. And I don't think they care that it further alienates all the people that elected him. I mean, farmers in Nebraska sell their wheat someplace else. I mean, they only buy inputs from out of the country and only sell their product out of the country. I mean, it's insane. If you want to protect your electorate in Nebraska, we're going to turn. He can turn the middle of the country blue through this
Yeah.
because they're going to be in such distress.
And I don't think what you and I are saying are mutually exclusive. I'm just trying to say that
Yeah,
this is part of a plan. This isn't just an
yeah.
idiotic
Oh,
theory. This is part of a
yes.
plan. And if you saw that chart that he put up in
Hmm.
the Rose Garden that someone with more brains than him created, there was
Hmm.
nothing on it that was true or accurate. There was nothing
Hmm.
on it that was true or accurate.
Yep.
And so all I'm saying is I think it's part of a grand plan, which we can talk about what we think the aspects of it are, and we probably aren't even covering them all. That's my only
Right.
point.
So let me add one more piece to this, and that's the
Yep.
same thing that Elon Musk did with Doge and with Twitter. I mean, look at what he did at Twitter. Musk came in, he got rid of 80% of the employees. He trashed the existing business model. He caused a cratering of the value of Twitter on the stock market. And then he rebuilt in his own image and likeness. Most of us, that is, most business analysts, even if I am not one, would say that it has not been successful as a business enterprise, but as a power enterprise. It has been brilliantly successful. It got rid of the institutionalized forces within Twitter, particularly the people running content control who might say no to him. It remade Twitter as a vehicle for his ideological perspective and an amplification of his ideas. And that seems to have been the objective. So this too can be an exercise in power in which Trump simultaneously craters the world economic order he despises and much of what takes place internally in the US and what he is going to then rebuild will be in his image and likeness, even if it makes the rest of us worse off.
Bill.
Yeah, I have to step in because of all this over optimism that we've been hearing from my co-panelists, putting together the criminology hat, the econ hat, and the law hats that I wield. This is just absolutely classic. First, tariffs throughout history have been immensely associated with corruption. Throughout US history, they have been immensely associated with corruption. They've also been associated with blowing up the economy and screwing it up. And guess who emphasizes this all the time? That group that created Project 2025. That's what they tell us. And they're right about those aspects of history. So this is not, I agree that he is dumb, though he is incredibly dumb. It is that he is incredibly corrupt, right? And malevolent. And this allows him to do all of those things. So what does he like to do? He likes to hurt entities. He likes to make them grovel. We've seen this with the law firms, right? This way, he can do it, as my colleagues have just explained, to all kinds of foreign countries, all kinds of foreign leaders who he's going to make grovel. Um, but also, he's going to personally profit from it. And all the hangers-ons. Remember, this is a whole administration in which you cannot get a job unless you're willing to lie. And I don't mean lie a little bit. Like Paul said, this whole alleged list and allegedly reciprocal tariff, it is a complete lie, right? They created a number that simply says if people sell us more than they buy from us, then they're somehow abusing us by selling us goods we want at a cheaper price. Okay. None of that is true. He knows it's not true, but it is going to enrich him enormously and feed his power, both domestically, as all kinds of American firms and CEOs bend the knee to get more favorable treatment, right? And this is what I talked about last time, that usually what I'm focused on with these elite white collar criminals is that they create this veneer that they are legitimate, brilliant folks. They're past that, right? They're, as I said, into the intimidation and the advertising. Trump is hanging out with these tariffs, a huge for sale sign. And people and governments are going to pay tens of billions of dollars to try to get more favorable treatment if he succeeds. This is something where every economist that's a real economist knows it's a catastrophe. That's why you see no economist taking the lead. All the economists that might support him, they've already written for 20 years why this is disastrous. And they know we will pull out those documents if they try to go on television and support these things. So what do we get instead? We get the Secretary of Commerce, who is the most insane huckster in the history of the world. And then we get all these metaphors of, we're redesigning the home, right? We're repairing the home. And during the repair stage, things are kind of bad. No, you are destroying the home. You had a home that was functional. You had an economy that, according to very conservative types, not liberals at the IMF and such, was the global engine of the economic recovery under the Democrats. So they took a relatively well-functioning, and at least in lots of ways, economy, and they're deliberately trashing it and claiming that it's a home repair. Guess where we've seen home repairs like that? In the con. Because a leading way, in particular targeting blacks in America, was the home repair guys that would come to your home and say, "Oh, we're going to fix it for you." And then they would basically never even complete the work. The work would be incredibly shoddy, immensely overpriced, and they would induce you to get second and third mortgages and create a catastrophe. So the folks that made the con are particularly well positioned to tell you how this one is going to end. We've seen it before on a more like retail basis. We're about to see it wholesale, baby.
Although
Okay.
my favorite of all, when it was, I think it was Bassett who said, he goes, well, before the last recession, things were good too. So the fact that things are good is a sign that there's not that is always so that means that there's no difference here. I mean, what the hell? I mean, it's just silly.
I,
But they do it. These serious guys who are billionaires are standing out there in front of cameras in front of the White House saying this stuff. It's shameful.
Billionaires are not serious people in America anymore, and they aren't smart, and they aren't good at business. They are terrible at business. They are great at the grift. They make money from us. Elon Musk gets his money overwhelmingly from the public sector in the form of these credits, green credits and such, which number in the tens of billions of dollars in funds that he gets, which exceeds his other source of funds by a considerable margin. All these folks, and remember, what was the name of the third party guy from Texas?
Paul,
Uh,
not Rand Paul, his dad, Ron Paul.
Oh no,
no,
he
before.
ran. You're right. He ran SS, whatever the name of that company was.
Yeah, it was all
Open up the
Graham?
hood. Open up the hood and look at the engine.
Yeah, and he got his money from being a federal contractor on information systems,
That's
right?
correct.
You look at all of these folks that made this immense amounts of money, and that is the single largest explanation for how they got the money. So we have this myth in the United States, like all my heroes were always cowboys. But for us, it's financial cowboys, right? We impute all kinds of things. Watch a fanboy react to Trump. Look at the videos when he makes his latest BS promise about a self-driving vehicle that was going to be here 8 years ago and was going to be here every year thereafter. And by the way, they just stopped it entirely and such. But they're just out of their mind fanboying in all of this stuff.
Well, I'm going to bring up two relatively unrelated, just to plant the seed, not any reaction, but I want to use this as kind of a dovetail to you, Mark. But first of all, Howard Lutnick. Oh yeah, everybody who cries about getting their welfare, or excuse me, their social security check is a fraudster. Oh yeah, by the way, he lived. I just found out next door to Jeffrey Epstein. I didn't know that until this morning. I don't know if that has any weird correlation somewhere, but but what June said to me, and Bill, you have so much information on this, but as it relates to our work in the con, what June just said, I mean, it is sticking in my head. It's just hovering over like a nuclear emoji. I mean, the fact that we know what happens as a result of the criminality and widespread fraud that envelops the system if it's not held to account. And I lived through it, which led me on a journey to meet all of you who are trying to prevent it and have been preventing it for decades, right? Now the entire country is being marked because of this fraud. And to think that Donald Trump is doing all of the tariffs to be able to enrich himself while Doge is destroying the most vulnerable amongst us. And then on top of that, all the biggest law firms in this country, these white collar law firms, whether it's Covington and Burling, whether it's Paul Weiss, whether it's all of these other elements, Mark,
And
yeah, McFadden, Arden, and there's others that are kind of pushing back a little bit. But again, this has been a runaway train wreck to rug pull the law that this fraudster has been getting away with for decades. And here is the sum total that you guys have been fighting for decades, Paul. How do you respond to what June says that it could actually be worse than what we experienced with the great financial crisis?
well, I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you this, that, and I'm sorry, Bill, I'm going to be a little bit optimistic here. We can't rely on the Department of Justice, that's for sure. But at least as of today, we're still a democracy. And the judiciary is holding right now. They're holding. Congress, the Senate acted in a joint way to step in and show the president that tariffs are, and the collection of revenue is the province of the House of Representatives and the Senate. So the Senate acted. Now, of course, the House is a bunch of lemmings. I'm not sure they're going to act, but we still are a democracy. I have my hopes that as people are hurt and continue to be pillaged by this economic destruction that's happening out there, that some congressman on the Republican side or congresswoman will finally react and take away the power of the president, which they can do and they should do, and the Senate has done, and move to take away the power of the president to act unilaterally here. That's my hope and desire. And I'm sure Bill thinks I'm crazy for thinking that way, but that's where I am.
Well, Mark, Paul, I know you might have to bail out, and if you do, thank you for joining us in your time on this Friday. But Mark, I mean, listen, we've seen this capitulation by these white shoe law firms, right? And you had mentioned in our last dialogue, and off the heels of what Bill had introduced a couple of weeks ago, you're in a unique position as somebody not in one of those tall white shoe law firms. What is your sort of sense, from your view at the moment?
Well, I think that, and I finally finished that op-ed that the New York Times has now rejected about this, but but I've been rejected by better over the years. The what we can't forget is that these are the firms that were big players in creating the world that created Trump. The corruption of both political parties, these tall building law firms, and particularly the ones that Trump is targeting, the ones that make their living influencing government, and getting white collar criminals out of trouble, and stopping, making the world safe for corporations not to be regulated. And or for the environment to get worse, all this. So we got to recognize that these guys, what they do is unsavory. That's what that is living, and they're making thousands and thousands of dollars. And only the very most elite companies and individuals in the country have access to these firms. Now, that doesn't mean that every lawyer shouldn't be on the march defending those law firms that are raising these constitutional issues about these executive orders, which are clearly an attack on the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution. They are clearly an attack on the right to counsel. And even rich people deserve to have the lawyers of their choice under the Sixth Amendment, just as much as poor people have the right to counsel as well. So we have to defend those guys, but we have to remember who the hell they are and who we're defending, and put that in a little bit of context. Now, for the ones that have capitulated, there's just a special place in hell for those guys. They are a discredit to the profession. I still believe that we're a learned profession, that we are people who are required by our professional responsibilities to put principle ahead of profits. I do it every day in my practice. There's not a class action case that I can't settle to the great benefit of me, to the detriment of the members of the class. And I wrestle with that every single day. And every single day there's an example of me, and it's hard, because my family likes nice things, and I like to go on vacation, and I like to be able to I'd like to be able to retire someday. I'm benefiting from this. I'll retire quicker than everybody else because I have less money in my 401k than probably everybody else. So I've survived the last 2 days quite well, as a result of that. But at the end of the day, that it is shameful, and it is worthy of careful consideration by state bar associations, of the conduct of the principles of Paul Weiss, of the principles of Skadden Arps, to promise to do pro bono work, for causes, for the sole purpose of creating profit and benefit for clients. I think they ought to. I think we have to take a serious look, and those of us in the profession should really scorn and ostracize those people just as hard as we should defend those lawyers who do something I wouldn't do for a living, but they deserve the entire bar's respect. But at the end of the day, what Trump has done is basically disarmed those guys. So it's up to us regular lawyers, to defend the people that are being deported, to defend the public employees who are being wrongfully fired, to bring those constitutional claims, on behalf of nonprofits that are the Cleveland Food Bank lost $1 million worth of food in the last 2 weeks based on changes that DOJ has ordered in the Department of Agriculture. 500,000 tons of food. At the time, by the way, as good as the economy has been, and they're actually giving out more free meals at the Cleveland Food Bank than they have since even at the height of the pandemic. When there were lines, people were lined up in I don't know if everybody's familiar with the famous parking lot where the Browns tailgates take place, but they took that over, and every Wednesday, people would drive through, and it was literally tens of thousands of families were relying on the food bank. More are relying on it now than we're relying on it at this time in 2020, and they're pulling the rug out from under it now. So while the economy's been good and the stock market's been good, life is not good for working class and middle class people in this country, and they are suffering. And so somebody's got to bring that lawsuit on behalf of the food bank. Somebody's got to bring those, and so I'm hoping, like we did to some small degree in the financial crisis with foreclosures, to help mobilize the bar, to use their good skills. I mean, I'll put the skills of some of these personal injury lawyers and domestic lawyers and consumer lawyers I work with in the courtroom or in their analytical skills up against anybody in the country,
Mhm.
including the guys at those tall building firms. And they sleep better at night too. So we need to all step up as members of the bar. And I'm trying to look for any way that we can in our firm to be part of that.
The candidate I was talking about was Ross Perot. I
Ross
looked it
Right,
up
Perot.
right, right,
while
right.
we were doing this. But I'm also going to continue to try each week to suggest something positive we can do, like you, Mark, has just done, and that is whistleblowers,
Mhm.
right? Whistleblowers, we had an incredible test, right? It's often difficult to know about the state of morality. Out of the great financial crisis, we had more whistleblowers than the rest of the world combined in the United States. And it wasn't even close, right? And in particular, the con focuses on two of those whistleblowers. Um, both of them were very senior level. Both of them were absolutely right, did it within the firm, going up the chain as you're supposed to, bringing the facts in considerable detail, even when they knew that people didn't, want the facts up above, they persisted in doing that. And then we had, after the great financial crisis, a whole series of scandals, including Wells Fargo, for example. Those two gentlemen, centerpieces of the documentary The Con, remain unemployed and unemployable in finance to this day, decades after they blew the whistle. Now, these are people that had immense technical skills, plus what you were just focusing on correctly, Mark, ethics. And not just ethics in a formal sense, but a commitment to do the right thing, even when you were going to pay. And they knew they were going to pay an enormous price for this. We need to, especially with the new Trump administration, be completely out front in creating additional mechanisms to both bring forward the whistleblowers and protect them with legal support, but also get them jobs.
Mhm.
Let's see, where are the honest business folks? Where are these brilliant CEOs that want the best people and people with who have demonstrated, right? They've been in the cauldron and they withstood it and exemplified everything we say we want in people, and they end up unemployable. That has to stop. So let's get these good billionaires and millionaires and such coming forward and saying, yeah, I'm going to give those people like that high level positions. I'm going to also protect them. I'm going to continue to use, say, if it's appropriate, the law firms that Trump is going to go after. And I'm going to state publicly that I'm going to go to those firms where it makes sense in terms of legal representation.
That coming from where I'm coming, because we had the opportunity to get Dick Bone and Michael Winston and others, Gary and so on and so forth, and quite frankly, Paul. I just found out in a previous discussion with Paul, and I'm wondering how June, you and Bill can bring this into the dialogue. it didn't occur to me because I never asked the question. It just came up on a dialogue that when Paul was prosecuting a lot of the healthcare fraud, but also a whole garden variety of the bad organized crime actors in Miami during the 80s and so forth, when he was being developed within the Department of Justice, they went after the attorneys. They went after the bad attorneys. And I know that, June, you brought this up before. This was, I mean, you of all, basically commented. I mean, but listen, we know that Covington and Burling, for example, of course, did a lot of work to cover for the too big to fail financial institutions and everything that played out during the Obama administration, considering I could go on and on. Can you guys talk about prosecuting attorneys?
It's not a good way to get invited to dinner parties if you're a prosecutor, but it was they're in many crimes they're part of the problem, but it's a real tough sled. I think, and I got to go, but I think more bar complaints were filed against me as a prosecutor than anybody in the Southern District of Florida. It's not fun sledding, but if they're part of the problem in the criminal enterprise, you got to go after them. And we did, not just me, a whole slew of us down in Miami did it, and it was very effective.
So to you, June, your point about, you said that previously, that we have to identify and recognize that that's been part of the problem, is it not?
Well, I think it's more generic. And when I see, I mean, what I've been struck by as Trump and his minions corrupt the entire federal government is the playbook they're taking is a playbook of corporate America. And we have to recognize how corporate America has been corrupted systematically in sometimes pernicious but largely invisible ways, and sometimes more directly. So let me apply that to attorneys. I think Big Law sold out a generation ago. The business model of Big Law is different from what it used to be. So there's been news stories about how the grandchildren of one of the founders of Paul Weiss don't want their grandfather Rifkin's name mentioned in response to any of this, that he'd be turning over in his grave. But his founding of Paul Weiss is in an era when the name partners have their name on an enterprise they are proud of. They mentor junior associates. The lawyers, at least the ones who survive the early years, stay for a lifetime. They don't jump ship. That changed a generation ago. Big law firms are a collection of practice groups, and the practice groups are beholden to very powerful, wealthy clients. And if Paul Weiss had stood up to the federal government, Paul Weiss is absolutely convinced they would have won in court, that Trump's executive order is unconstitutional, that getting it struck down very quickly would have been easy. What's not easy is the defection of the practice groups who were threatening to leave Paul Weiss if they stood up to Trump. And the people calling the shots on that aren't necessarily the firm leaders. It is the clients, who are lots of big companies, and the lawyers who represent those clients, and the lawyers who standing at Paul Weiss and in the profession depend on retaining those clients. So what you're talking about is an interconnected system. Interconnected in the sense that both the clients and the law firm are dependent on the federal government, and the lawyers are dependent on the clients. The clients are the ones really calling the shots, and the clients have no interest in standing up to Trump, which makes the law firms vulnerable. And the law firms have to be willing to say, I'm willing to let go a large share of our client base that may have nothing in particular to do with the immediate controversy, but that just doesn't want to be part of it because they too are vulnerable to the federal government cracking down on them in ways they can't win. They don't win even if Paul Weiss wins against Trump. So that's what we're talking about. And to reform the legal profession requires the ability of the lawyers to say no to clients. They don't have that now when you're talking about the wealthiest parts of the legal profession. But saying to individual lawyers, like the people I'd like Ed Martin, the acting U.S. attorney for D.C. I'd like to see him disbarred. He's done fairly egregious ethical things. So cracking down on the lawyers for unethical conduct can be done. But I think to really change the system, you've got to be able to say the lawyers can say no to clients.
2 generations ago, we realized that the many of the nation's largest law firms and the world's largest audit firms were aiding and abetting CEOs looting the savings and loans. We made criminal referrals on Arthur Andersen, for example, and other law firms. Justice Department was unwilling or unable to bring those cases. They would have been tough cases, but I think righteous cases. But we also brought civil actions and even a freeze order against major law firms and got recoveries. Again, this is 2 generations ago, in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So yes, this has been we're old enough to have seen this descent, but it is not of recent nature. And Trump has the huge advantage that he's now dealing with a much reduced degree of professionalism among the most elite lawyers and audit firms.
I don't know if this constitutes as a whistleblower, but I've just made contact with with an attorney that is leaving Paul Weiss that I would like to maybe bring into this dialogue soon, so he can interact. And I'm going to forward him this shortly thereafter. But further to your point about Arthur Andersen and what June just delivered so profoundly, was what I saw earlier today, and I shared with the group guys. George Conway, a guy who's at the head of he's a partner in a law firm for 30 years dealing with mergers and acquisitions. And he reveals today what you guys have all basically discussed for the last several weeks, right? So it's this relationship that June has just described, but then there's this almost like, I hate to use this term, it's kind of a silly term, but coming to Jesus moment, this thing that it's like, oh my God, my entire career pursuing the bottom line for the firm has just sold my country down the river, and now I'm acknowledging it. So the question that I have to you guys, considering you've only done this for decades, I mean, this is what America needs to understand. The people that are on this panel that tirelessly do this in the public to get the information, we're going to have this national protest movement tomorrow. But that, in my opinion, if you don't have the understanding of what June and Bill and Mark and everybody else who's taken place in these things don't understand the core of power and corruption and the way these things work, and you're looking at they've got the entirety of this paradigm, and they've done it and they've prosecuted it for decades, and yet there's this giant void where the bad guys are taking over because of these scenarios. What is it going to take between the four of you to get this message, I think, to the people that are out there lost in translation that still don't fully understand the nature of this corruption we're dealing with? And I want to turn that to you, Bill, to start with.
We simply have to get more and more people that come from this world and can tell people, yes, this is in fact the world. It's not some lefty or righty thing. It's been a long process, and the incentives are incredibly perverse in the modern world. Um, June has 2 colleagues who write about this in particular, talking about the investment banks and the audit firms. But the change from true partnerships,
Mm-hmm.
has had a disastrous long-term effect because it creates such perverse incentives.
June.
So Yeah, again, my colleagues are Richard Painter and Claire Hill, who are writing about the shift in investment banking culture, which parallels the shift in law firms. But more generally for the public, what I put on my Facebook page the day after the election is, can somebody explain to me how the people who, with good reason, feel they're being ripped off by the current economy are in a coalition with the people who are working overtime to rip them off? What my political science colleagues tell me is when you look at the political realignment that underlies the Trump victories, those people, the high information folks, are also part of what is perceived, meaning us, as a remote, out of touch, and sanctimonious elite. College graduates, professionals who look down on the low information voters, but also who seem to be, not at all sensitive to their needs. And what you have is Trump walking into the vacuum that is created. Those folks in the hinterlands know that corporate America is corrupt. They know they're the victims of corporate America. And they see Trump not as a reformist who will tweak things so they get, you know, higher payments from the federal government. They see Trump as a champion who will bring the entire system down on the heads of the people who currently benefit from it. And when you say, what is the source of Trump's appeal? It's that. The bros, the Joe Rogan bros want the system torn down. They view international, I mean, they wouldn't articulate it this way, but the truth is, they want international trade, the large law firms, the universities, they want them torn down. And if what, I like to say, we are turning the United States into rural Arkansas, maybe rural Missouri. Missouri is 49th in the country in expenditures on education. Uh, they say bring it on because we're already in trouble. It's those people who are benefiting from the current system who will be the biggest losers. And if that's the case, we're all in favor of it. So to counter this, we need a vision, a vision that takes on the plutocrats, not just a vision that takes down Trump.
Well, and again, what you guys opened up with was this reality of the facade of tariffs. It's used for corruption. It's used to directly enrich Trump and his family at the expense of what we're seeing through Doge and the veterans and Department of Education and scientists and NOAA and everything that makes this country safe, not to mention a powerhouse. But it's the integrity of law that manifests everything. Like I said in several conversations before, a plane doesn't fly, a ship doesn't float, a building doesn't stand if it doesn't have integrity. The same with the law, because of absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I'll bring it back to you, Marc, to kind of close this out, unless you guys want to continue going forward, because I'll go as long as you want to. But the long and the short of it is, again, the vacuum of the information of people on our side collectively. Okay. But our side has always been, shall we say, further ensconced in silos over the course of the last 2 decades because of technology. You're a part of a specific category of something, right? And it's usually in the identity politics wars, right? And people, and it's important information, and it's important to protect those people. But at the same time, what drives the whole thing is money, and who has it and who doesn't. And so, what I just heard for the last 2 weeks from Bill, and ultimately what he had suggested today, was encapsulated in this: we need to find whistleblowers. We need to work with the state AGs, or law firms like Marc had just panned out, to be able to bring these cases, but maybe even find those on the upper end of the spectrum to potentially help try to save America, rescue America, to do something that obviously the Department of Justice isn't going to do. And we know what's happening at the FBI. So if all of the systems have failed, again, it's up to the people who have proved themselves time and again throughout, decades, which all of these experts have. And America, you need to understand that if collectively we create a critical mass, that when we start talking about corruption first and foremost, will we be able to, I think, remedy a lot of the other problems that I think are the consequence, but that Trump has perverted through the tech bros, through the Joe Rogans of the world, to be like, okay, like LBJ said years ago, if you can convince the lowest rung white guy that he's higher on the ladder than the highest rung black guy, you can pick his pockets all day. And I thought to myself when I heard that, oh, wait a second. So these guys have been doing this now for what, centuries, basically? So,
Mhm.
Mark, to that point, I mean, you guys know how to turn the tables if we had critical mass and if we had a plan, which you guys are obviously developing. So,
Well, we need to frame everything in terms of law and order. That's what this is. That you can explain every single behavior of the Trump administration and the people that are in his inner circle based on a law and order analysis. Why the members and there was a little bit in the 25 hours of Cory Booker's speech. There was probably a good 45 minutes of talk of law and order, which was better than none. But if we can get the leaders of the Democratic Party or whatever party replaces it, because I'm not sure that the Democratic Party is going to survive this. Because now because half of them want to argue that we should reduce regulations and create abundance as an alternative to but we need to restore ourselves as the party of that government is there to protect all of us, not to enhance the profits of individuals. And every single thing needs to be discussed through that lens. And I think we can be helpful at reminding people and reminding those people who have power. Local prosecutors, by the way, have a role to play here too, even if they lose. I mean, what was the Jim Comey and the chicken shit club? That if you're not bringing cases that you lose, you don't belong in the U.S. Attorney's office. Well, you know what? Where's the Maryland prosecutor? Where's the kidnapping charges against the folks that kidnapped that guy because he had the wrong tattoos and sent him to a prison in El Salvador? Why aren't those people being charged with kidnapping? They had intent. They had what their qualified immunity is not going to get them out of that. You know what? And they might lose that case, but why aren't they bringing it? They should be arresting the folks that arrested that guy. They're criminals. They kidnapped an innocent American and shipped him to a concentration camp. Um, that's the law and order stuff that we ought to be talking about, and that's what we have the power to do with local officials, with local AGs, with the private bar, is to be that force.
Bill, we're running out of time here. Will you please bring us home? And again, I'll just stipulate that I'm willing to go as long as you guys are. But if you guys want to close and move on to other arrangements, but Bill,
No,
please.
I'll just endorse what Mark said. This is criminality and predation in particular. Predation is when, again, the key from the French economists centuries ago, when predation becomes a way of life for people in power, they create a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that valorizes it. That's what's going on. And just for our viewers, the folks on right now, basically, we're all from sort of a culturally Midwestern background. So we're talking about the things we were taught as kids. You treat people well. You don't abuse power, right? You stand up to people who are powerful and misusing that power to hurt weaker people. That's why I think we got in to becoming lawyers, right?
Right.
And we practice what our parents preached.
Well, but we understand that if you're going to stand up to a bully, you're going to get punched in the face every once in a while, and that's okay. That's what patriots do in times of crisis, and that's where are the patriots? Where are the law and order folks? Let's find them. Let's bring them together, and let's move forward.
June, anything else?
Um, yeah, I think when I was listening to Jonathan Haidt the other day, who is on a crusade to ban cell phones from schools, and what he's saying about the current generation solved a mystery for me. You know, a generation ago, the Federalist Society used to be a debating society, and you know, the conservatives and really the libertarians had interesting things and I used to debate them on occasion. But what it's become today is a video game society. The goal is to own the libs, to take down your opponents. It is to score points, but truth doesn't matter. Honor doesn't matter. And Jonathan Haidt was talking about how what we have done with our kids who are embedded in video game land is that there is no moral core. Video game land is like the Federalist Society. Score points. Why? If you pull the wool over your opponents, you won. It doesn't matter what the ethics and morality of the tactics are. Winning is what counts. We have created a society that says if Elon Musk is the richest man in the world, he wins, even if his spaceships crash, if Tesla is losing out to the better constructed Chinese EVs, if he is lying, cheating his way to global domination at the expense of the people who depend on Social Security or the food banks that are delivering food to people who are hungry, or the healthcare system the federal government underwrites that provides healthcare for at least some of the ill. And the answer is what we need to bring back is honor, integrity. The idea that how you play the game matters every bit as much as whether or not you win.
Well, my journey to meet all of these incredibly important people that have to be the light to shine to guide us forward, and I'm going to do everything I can to make to get this information to as many people as I possibly can. But my come from was always one because I was raised with it. I was very fortunate to have a family that understood honor and integrity, so that was always my come from. And then I found out that the system thought I was expendable. And my message to you and everybody out there who is watching this, I'm not expendable, and chances are you're not either. And so the sum total of this conversation is what I knew on the playground when I was in fourth grade. You don't run away and cower from bullies, you fight back. And you fight back with people that know how to fight back. And so hopefully we'll be able to get that message to everybody. But I will thank you again for all of your time and efforts, and we'll continue moving forward. Onwards and upwards, my friends. All the best.
Thanks all.
Thank you.